Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Five Star Zone, a special edition because Michigan State just fired athletic director Alan Haller. They're moving on from him. His final day is going to be May 11th, and they got a search committee coming in to figure out who's going to be the next athletic director of Michigan State in the Big Ten, Power Four school. Harold Shelton joining me here on the Five Star Zone. I want to say it was a shock, but Harold, I have been hearing rumblings for about a year. Ever since the new president, Gauskowitz, came in, it was always like, I think he gave Allen, basically, you can audition for your job to see if you're going to be retained, but it was always the biggest question of, is he going to bring in Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director from North Carolina? Is he going to come here? And now to add insult to injury, or, maybe, look, Bubba Cunningham wasn't a big fan of bringing Bill Belichick there. And this thing is just getting weird and weird and weirder. Even after I found out why the Hard Knocks didn't cover the Carolina Tar Heels, because his girlfriend was like, she needed to be an executive producer and needed to see dailies. And they're just like, yeah, you know what? How about no? A lot of influence from her. I don't know how long he wants to stick with that dog and pony show circus. Is he just going to be the next guy at Michigan State? I don't know. But Harold, I would like to say I heard rumblings and I didn't believe it. Was like, come on now. I mean, every program is flourishing at Michigan State. The only one really not flourishing is the football team, and he just brought his guy in. So it's like, you got to give him some time. But men's, women's basketball, hockey, gymnastics, soccer, doing well. Tennis, doing well. And it's like, okay, well, the goal is to hire the best coaches, because he's hired a lot of good coaches. They're starting to win. Didn't he do his job? Why did he get relieved of duty?
Yeah, I was definitely surprised by it. To your point, as an athletic director, your job is to bring in good coaches and, try to, kind of raise the tide of all of the programs in the athletic department, not just football and basketball. Obviously, we know football and men's basketball are the two main drivers, football especially. But the fact that he brought in Adam Nightingale and he brought in Robin Fralick, and now you got back-to-back Big Ten champions in hockey, you got women's basketball team making the tournament multiple years in a row, like you said, tennis, women's gymnastics. It seems like those coaches really appreciated the effort that he tried to put in those programs and not, just kind of cast them off to the side. They're trying to bring in a whole new building for some of those sports to kind of get them up to speed. Even when he, got his new office overlooking 1855 place, he's like, I don't even feel comfortable in this position, knowing that Jennison Fieldhouse, has a lot of work that needs done to it. So he was a guy who just seemed like he understood what the student athlete needed. But unfortunately, I think in the way that this new age of college sports is looking at, the job that he was doing doesn't match up with the 2025 standards. I think the job he was hired for 2020, 2021, before we got in the wild, wild west of NIL, he was perfect for that. But now
Harold, you know what? You nailed it. When he was hired back in 2021, college sports wasn't this way. College sports was going the way that he wanted it to go. Now, the problem is, and I think I'm speculating here, but if you just connect the dots, the reason why it was money, it was fundraiser. It was, believe it or not, as great as he was in raising all the boats with the tide, football wasn't there. If football's not king, nobody cares about your other sports. It's not fair, but life ain't fair. And more people know who Aiden Childs and Nick Marsh are, more Spartan fans, than anybody on the gymnastics team or the hockey team or whatever. Pick the soccer team. But they know who these two are, and they know that these two aren't winning. And they know that Michigan State's nowhere close to competing for a college football playoff. So I think that's why, is because the MSU NIL program wasn't being competitive. It was fractured and splintered. There was so many different ones. I mean, they tried to do the SD
4L.
F4L, and that didn't go. And people were asking, like, does this have anything to do with Mel Tucker? And I'm like, actually, it really didn't. Mel Tucker was almost a feather in his cap because sources say he wasn't a big fan of the Tucker extension. And the second he found out that something happened, he got removed. I mean, we were doing a pod, and I mean, it was just like, and the next day it was like, oh, by the way, congratulations, you beat Richmond and you're fired because all of this stuff is coming out. I don't think it had anything to do with that. I think it really boiled down to money, and the landscape has changed in the 4 years since he signed his contract. That it's about being a fundraiser. It reminds me, I think it's Heather Lyke who was the AD of the year for Pitt and got fired because she wasn't raising enough funds. Like, you got to do stadium. They're doing stadium improvement at Michigan State, but how much are you doing? How much money are you bringing in? Why isn't the Michigan State football team one of the teams that's bringing in some of these top transfers, bringing in some of the top recruits? When you see what Michigan just did for Bryce Underwood, and you're like, well, man, why are we a poverty program and you're in the Big Ten, but we can't do this? So I do think that this next person's job, what Allen did was, it was admirable. You raised the level of every team in athletics. But I think this next person's job, Sheldon, correct me if I'm wrong, you got to raise money and you got to get the football team to compete for a college football playoff. I don't even think you got to win, but you need to be in the top 15 every year. And you got it at MSU. You need to be making the playoffs at least 2 out of every 5 years to say, okay, we're competing, we're there, we're competitive, we can bring in and we can draw top talent.
Yeah, no, I do think that's what it's going to boil down to. And if it got to a point where he didn't have the support of the guys who were giving the money, then that's a losing battle that he just couldn't win. Like you said, despite the fact that they've won so many Big Ten championships across other sports, football is the main one. And they've had one winning season since D'Antonio retired. And that coach is no longer here and hasn't been here for a couple of years now. So if you kind of read in what the president said, he basically said he's looking for a new AD who can best navigate the changing landscape of college athletics while working closely with internal and external stakeholders to move Michigan State forward as a leader among the Power Four institutions. So if the previous AD didn't have the relationships and didn't have everybody all together moving in the same direction, then that was a battle he was never going to win. And like you said, it's going to be about money. It's 1,000%
I think that you're
money.
never going to get everybody going in the same direction, but I think it's, hey, guys, you got to understand, I got to feed the beast, and by the beast, the football program, because if they're good, then the fans feel good and more dollars come in, enrollment goes up. I mean, these are proven facts.
Yep.
You got to do this. You got to make people feel good to be a Spartan. That I think the next athletic director, that's why I look. Now they're doing a search firm, and I think that's kind of just to say that, that Gauskowitz can say, look, I didn't handpick my guy. The search firm said he was the best guy. And I think Bubba Cunningham, and for those who like, who is he? You remember him about a month ago because he was famous because he put North Carolina in the NCAA tournament, and everybody was like, wait, they didn't deserve to be there. They got to play in the playing game. But he was over the tournament selection committee. So that is the guy that they're looking at. He's, looks like he's big in fundraising. He's the type of person they want. He and the new president have a relationship. I would think that would be the slam dunk. Now, looking at his contract, he could get out of his contract. He has to give North Carolina a 120-day notice. And then after that, which kind of coincides with what's going on now, that he would be there in the fall. I think it would take him to either September or October, somewhere around there. That's 4 months. 4 months from now.
Yeah, it'd be September 1st, pretty much.
So, wow, the year's flying by. But yeah, it would take you right there. So that's who I'm thinking. If I had to put my money on it, that's the guy. Other people out there, I mean, the sad reality, and I'll go to my grave saying he fell on the sword for MSU, and he shouldn't have ever left, was Mark Hollis.
Yep.
Mark Hollis went down because of the whole thing that went on with the former gymnastics coach. Not even going to say his name.
Yep.
But Hollis didn't really know this guy. This was, he had to save face, and shame on MSU for letting him fall on the sword by himself while everybody else just stood there and watched him bleeding out. But Mark Hollis was ahead of time. If Mark Hollis was there, I think MSU would be on the cutting edge of NIL because he was always pushing the boundaries, whether it was playing on the battleship, whatever it was. Playing the hockey game in the football stadium, right? The NHL does it, but people forget that was his brainchild doing that. Playing basketball games inside of football arenas. The game against Kentucky, the basketball is what he called it. He came up with all of these different things that I think that he would have been. Now, I don't know if Mark would come back. I mean, maybe it's just, you know what? That was my time. It's long gone. I don't want to be a part of that. But I was just thinking, like, man, that would be a perfect guy if you can't get Cunningham. Another one is even a local guy, and doing some research and just and talking to some folks. The dark horse is Western Michigan's athletic director. It was Dan Bartholomew. Really big into fundraising out there, getting, I think, the hockey team, even though they're the national title winners in hockey, I think they were getting a new arena anyway. Like he's bringing in some dollars there. Maybe I forgot the guy's name, but the athletic director at UCLA who has some ties.
Martin Jarman.
Yeah. So those are some other names that you could possibly be looking at. But I think that I would be shocked if it's not Bubba Cunningham is going to be the next athletic director of Michigan State.
Yeah, I'm not sure who it would be. I mean, Cunningham does make a lot of sense, with the previous ties to the president.
His name's Bubba. Come on.
All right. This is very true. Very true. But I really do hope they cast a wide net, and I guess doing it now instead of doing it, when Holler's contract ran out, kind of gives them a jump start. And, even though the football team hasn't done well, like all of the resources are there. Like there's big money donors that are waiting. Even if they aren't donating now, they could still be waiting on the sidelines for the right time.
I'm glad you said that, Harold. I hope that the next guy doesn't just go after 2 or 3 billionaires.
Yes.
There's millionaires out there too. And I often equate it to this. If I said, Harold, I need you, by 6:00 tonight, I need you to have $100. Now you could go to a couple people and say, hey, can you give me $100? And you're going to hear, oh man, I got bills. I got this, that, and the other. Or you can go to 100 people and say, hey, you got $1. Yeah, I got $1. Here you go. If you ask 150 people, you will get $100. 50 may say no, but most will be like, yeah, here's $1. I got $1. Here's some change, whatever. You will get your money. I say that to say, same with NIL. Instead of just hitting up the Ishbias, instead of just hitting up the certain people, what if you hit up the millionaires and say, hey, can you donate this? Okay, cool. And you create the fund and you get it up. Because I guess, with the new law or new rules coming down, that they can they'll have like 23 million or so to actually pay. You're still going to have an NIL program to supplement that. That's just to get you in the door. But if you're going to want to get and retain and get some of these top players, you got to have the money. And it ain't just Matt Ishbia. It ain't just, whoever. There's people, as you say, who want to donate. And I don't think that they're doing a good job really identifying with those people and getting them in. But I'm with you. Jen Smith and Tom Izzo are the interim athletic directors. And I would be like, hey, guys, you're substitute teachers. Matter of fact, I think Jen Smith is already in the building, but Tom, hey, stay at the Breslin Center office.
Yep.
You're just here to make sure this
name only.
Neither one of you will get this job, okay? You won't. We got to go outside because by going outside, I think it helps because you could actually step on some toes. Whereas I think Izzo's been around too much that he can't walk in baseball and say, hey, we're going to take away some of your money and we're going to give it here.
Right.
You need somebody who has no ties, who could kind of be that jerk, can kind of be that asshole and be like, yeah, sorry, but new sheriff in town, your money's going over here.
No, yeah, totally agree with that. And I think just going outside the family can provide some fresh ideas too and fresh perspective. You just could approach it with a clean slate. Like you said, you don't have to worry about stepping on toes. You don't have to worry about personal relationships that might get fractured because you have to make tough decisions. Like, this is what this is. This is big boy business now. And, even though some programs have struggled, this is a team and is a program that has been to the college football playoff, that has won multiple Big Ten titles, that is getting new facilities, pay big money for a coach to leave his alma mater and come here. So the investment is there. The fan base is there. We've seen the revenue, attendance, their top 20 and those things. This is a program, when it has all of the resources going and everybody's rowing in the right direction, we've seen them get to the top of the sport and compete at that level. And so, to say that they can't do it again, I think, is silly. But you got to be able to put the investment in. You can't be getting outbid for dudes.
Yeah.
You got to have money to be ready to spend, to keep guys, to bring guys in. If you have to go the Michigan route and get a Bryce Underwood to show that you're really about this life, and spend the money, it's got to be there. And
right.
So,
I have to say, you can't be afraid to spend the money and fail. You can't be like, oh, we spent this money and didn't work out. I always thought that was Mark D'Antonio's biggest downfall. It wasn't the money, but I remember he had that super class in the 2016 after they went to the college football playoffs. And a lot of those guys failed and they washed out. And D'Antonio was just like, I got to go back to my roots and get the undiscovered players. And I thought that was his downfall at that point. It's like, no, you just had a bad class. Get up and do it over again. And you keep doing it over again. And when you do it enough, you could be like Georgia, who, hell, every other day somebody getting popped from some type of traffic and driving or getting suspended or leaving. But you got so many people there, you can absorb that.
Exactly.
So you're right. I mean, you got to pay the cost to get to the table. Now, once you get to the table, it doesn't mean you're going to win, but you got to be able to afford the buy-in. And right now, Michigan State is not affording the buy-in. And I think that's what's frustrating a lot of fans. And I think that's what the next athletic director has to come in here, get the money, and say, hey, all y'all coaches, especially, hey, Jonathan Smith, I pay for your buy-in. You got the players. Now, I need you to go out there and win, or, you're going to be gone. Because here's the other thing now. I guess the domino effect, I didn't hire you, Jonathan.
Yep.
You're not my guy.
Yep.
You don't win. I got somebody else who I think can do this. Just please, God, not Bill Belichick, but you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, you got anything else to add?
No, I mean, I just think that, again, the biggest thing is making sure you can get the big money donors to mostly be on the same page. Like you said, everyone's not going to be on the same page. And we've already seen some adaptability from Izzo. The fact that he was able to go out and get transfers who have been at multiple schools. He wasn't bothered by, certain things that he might have been bothered by in the past. So if you can get the resources behind it, they tried to go get Darius Adams, who wound up at Maryland. Apparently money was not an issue there. We're seeing coaches adapt that we didn't think would adapt in this NIL world. So as long as there are resources behind these coaches to go out and get players and make sure money's not the issue. If you don't get the player, it can't be because you didn't have the resources. Right. So as long as they provide the resources for these coaches and for these programs, Michigan State should be in the mix for getting the college football playoffs, getting the Final Fours, winning Big Ten championships. That should still be the formula, but got to get the hire right.
Right, because I still say, and it's going to go up, I'm sure, incrementally over the next few years, but your football team, just your football team alone, needs to be working on a budget of, at least 15 million, just your football team to get some of the top players in here. I'm not saying you got to have the oil money of Texas and, go spend like
They spent
Texas and
$40
Texas
million,
A&M
I
spending
think.
like $40 million on the team. But in the Big Ten, you got to be able to compete with Ohio State. You got to be able to compete with Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, USC. You got to be able to walk in there and say, you know what, son, we can pay you and we want you to come here. So if you turn us down, it's because you just didn't want to be a Spartan, not because we couldn't pay you.
Exactly.
That's the nature of the beast. I know for some people it probably turns you off, but what can I say? College football
what it is.
Changed, okay?
Yeah.
This ain't the 80s, this ain't the 90s, this ain't the early 2000s. Heck, this ain't 2021. Okay? It's changed. If you don't like it, it's never going to go backwards. You ain't putting that toothpaste back in the tube. But yeah, I think that program, and when you divvy up everything amongst all the sports, that 23 million shrinks. So it ain't all going to football. That's what I'm saying. Football, and I would even say probably Michigan State with basketball too would probably need their own separate $10 million for Izzo or whoever coaches after him to be able to go out and get players. And that comes through the donations, and you got to win. I mean, it's a different game.
Yep.
Good luck to whoever they go after. I mean, we'll monitor this when they get a new AD. Errol and I will come back and kind of break it down and see where it's going. But thought we would jump in because big news happened, and I promised you if something big happens, we'll be back. So for Harold Sheldon, I'm Rico Beard. Thanks for watching the 5 Star Zone.